Salvete omnes! Welcome to Land and Sea section 3. This one is the first of the Caesar sections. Again, it's a video, I'll talk fast, you'll pause. Moving on. I'm sure you know who Caesar is, but a very brief bit of background for our purposes today. He was the nephew of Gaius Marius, who was a famous general and politician who got into a civil war with another famous general and politician called Sulla. Marius lost that. Sulla spared Caesar, but Caesar therefore ended up fleeing to Spain, and he won quite a name for himself there, and then in his later military exploits, he rose up through the political/military ranks. He even became chief priest of all Rome in an election, which is a very strange way to do your politics, but there we are. Importantly for us, in 60 BC, he makes a deal with Pompey and Crassus, and they form the First Triumvirate, which is an informal agreement between the three most powerful men in Rome, where they basically promise to make each other's lives work. They share power. They push several laws through, and the relevant one for us is Caesar is given governorship of what's called Cisalpine Gaul, which basically means for us northern Italy, i.e. kind of where Milan is. He also gets governorship of Illyria and eventually Transalpine Gaul, which is basically France. He uses this as an excuse, more or less, to go into the conquest of Gaul to earn money and fame for himself. This goes quite well, as is famous. And in 55 BC, Caesar takes the excuse, and it is an excuse, of launching a punitive invasion, that is to say, an attack to punish someone for misdoings, in this case that they had supposedly helped a Gallic tribe. Realistically, he wasn't doing this, he was doing it for the fame of being the first Roman, to go and attack Britain, which was barely known, if at all, back in those days. This is because Caesar was writing his own account of these wars. They're written in the third person, which is very strange, and they were designed to be read out. They're not lies, there may be a little bit of exaggeration, but they're not lies, because this is very much contemporaneous events. Caesar sent back one of these, we call them now books, every year. And obviously people would have heard what was happening at the same time. He would also have had to do official reports and all the rest of it. So, very much the case that he would have been found out if he was lying. So he only exaggerates a little bit. Anywho, to the actual Latin. Having considered arbitratus as a perfect active participle, this in no way a suitable place to disembark, Caesar. Obviously there is no word for Caesar here, it's just third person, singular, he. Yeah, that's meant to be Caesar. He waited literally on anchors, but at anchor in English, up to the 9th hour, while the rest of the ships assembled there. Dum plus convinerent being an imperfect subjunctive, makes this dum meaning until clause, which you will meet very late on in GCSE, as does ad igredendum, a gerundive of purpose. Both of those you will meet at the end of your GCSE, I would imagine. Ships. Again, far too much research on ships here. Caesar specifically says in his own account that he brought 2 legions and 80 transport ships. He used these honorarii naves, ships of burden, basically. They probably looked something like this, which is the merchant ship that was called the same thing. He had another 18 for the cavalry, which set off from a different port and didn't arrive in time for the battle. He also had an unknown number, literally just whatever ships he had, of warships, which are probably these triremes. Tri because they have 3 sets of oars, as opposed to bi with 2 sets of oars. They're probably triremes. He describes them as having, amongst other things, ballistae and this corvus, the hooking landing plank, where you can attack other ships from. So they're probably triremes or other similarly sized ships. Meanwhile, he literally showed, I've translated it here, revealed to his legates and tribunes of the soldiers, military tribunes, who had been called together Convocatis is a perfect passive participle, so it's literally, he showed to the having been called together legates and tribunes, but that's very clunky in English. Both what he had learned from Volusinus and what he wanted to happen, or to be done. Theo is a slightly strange word, it means something like I happen, so fieri is the infinitive. Cognovisse is a pluperfect subjunctive, and velat is an imperfect subjunctive. Velat wouldn't really be nice here, translate what he was wanting to be done, so like with many times with wallow, we will translate that as a perfect. These are indirect questions, which again, you will do at GCSE. And he warned or advised that all these matters literally might, but really must, be done by them at the nod and at the time. The nod here, in the sense of as Caesar nods, as he gives the signal, and at the time, well, so that's the same thing. This is an example of what we call tautology, where you're saying the same thing twice to really emphasize what's going on. Oh, and incidentally, Volusinus was a military tribune who Caesar had sent ahead in order to work out what he was doing. It is not a place. That came up recently. So Caesar basically has got all of his commanders round. He's like, right, this is what I want to happen. As soon as I give the order, you need to be ready to go. Very military imagery here. Sort of a battle plan giving out. With these men having been dismissed, in fact, I'm going to pause there and note here. As I say here, Latin is doing something that English really shouldn't. It's when you've got a succession of participles to imply the chain of events. When this had happened, and this had happened, and this had happened, and this had happened, finally this happened. It's very clunky in English, so I've done my best to sort of rearrange it. Anyway, so with these men having been dismissed as a ablative absolute, and having obtained, nactus is a perfect active participle, having obtained a favourable both wind and tide. Favourable here, secundus, applying to both of those two things. Incidentally, for those of you who are paying attention, aistus, we saw in the Pliny, meant heat. Aistus can also apparently mean surge in the sense of like heat wave, and therefore tide. Bit of a strange one. Moving on. At one time, so at the same time, and with the signo having been darted, that is to say, another ablative absolute, with the signal given and the anchors raised, having advanced about 7,000 paces, literally, so 7 miles, from that place, he set up, constitutio can mean decide, but can mean set up. He set up the ships on an open and flat beach. Apertus, giving us the English word aperture, like in the game Portal, meaning an opening, so therefore a window. Here, open in the sense of open and plain, flat beach. Sure. So this is a lot of participles. We've got an ablative absolute, followed by a PAP, followed by another ablative absolute, and another ablative absolute, followed by another PAP, all to finally get us to the actual main verb, he set up the ships on the beach. It's a sort of way of emphasizing the number of things that is going on, nice progression of time. Caesar probably here emphasizing, at least to my mind, the sort of military actions that he's taking and the sort of the efficiency in the organisation. We don't 100% know for sure, for obvious reasons, but the best guess as to where this actually is, incidentally, is here, just north of Dover. So the likelihood is he's describing the White Chalk Cliffs when he gets to here, because he sailed directly across the channel, and obviously that is a terrible place to land. That is when he's saying, no way it's all suitable place to land. Well, no, it's a lot of big cliffs. He then sailed up, and probably is landing here on Ebbsfleet Peninsula, which back then was a little bit closer in. But in any case, it's a nice flat beach, and he can beach his ships pretty close in. He then has a fight, as you will find out. And yeah, that was only in 2017 when we were kind of working that out, and that's the best evidence. There's a ditch, there's some iron weapons, etc. So, best guesses. And that is the whole thing. As I say, sort of a setup here, Caesar explaining how he got to the fight and all the organisation that goes into that. We will see in the next ones what happens afterwards. Thank you very much, hope that helps.